Hello, and welcome to The Bard's Truth with your host, The Green Bard.
This is the top 5 of my top 10 list of the best sword fighters in Westeros. Number 5, Jon Snow. By my determination, this is where Jon Snow belongs on the list, prior to being attacked at Castle Black in his final chapter of A Dance with Dragons. Of his ability with a sword, we know quite a lot. In Winterfell, he was superior to his brother Robb with a sword. While feeling overmatched with Quora and Halfhand, he successfully blocked a barrage of attacks and vanquished his opponent at his earliest opportunity to attack. Even when Ghost's teeth closed savagely around the Ranger's calf, somehow Qhorin kept his feet, but in that instant, as he twisted, the opening was there. Jon planted and pivoted. The Ranger was leaning away, and for an instant it seemed that Jon's slash had not touched him. Then a string of red tears appeared across the big man's throat, bright as a ruby necklace, and the blood gushed out of him, and Qhorin Halfhand fell. Jon also has some impressive fighting against Iron Emmett, a Night's Watchman and Master-at-Arms, and Mance Rayder, who was disguised as Rattleshirt at the time. He loses to Mance, but bests Emmett. There is a lot to glean from both fights, but we'll cover the fight with Emmett here and save the other fight for later. The lack of sleep was catching up with him now, and Emmett was hammering him mercilessly across the yard, driving him back on his heels with one long looping cut after another, and slamming him with his shield from time to time for good measure. Jon's arm had gone numb from the shock of impact, and the edgeless practice sword seemed to be growing heavier with every passing moment. He was almost ready to lower his blade and call a halt when Emmett fainted low and came in over his shield with a savage forehand slash that caught Jon on the temple. He staggered, his helm and head both ringing from the force of the blow. For a half a heartbeat, the world beyond his eye slit was a blur. So Jon is losing focus due to fatigue and having a terrible day, but he had withstood the best Emmett could offer and was still fighting. Jon goes on to have a vision about fighting Robb, which infuriates him. The result is this. In the end, Halder and Horse had to pull him away from Iron Emmett, one man on either arm. The Ranger sat on the ground, dazed, his shield half in splinters, the visor of his helm knocked askew, and his sword 6 yards away. "Jon, enough!" Halder was shouting. "He's down! You disarmed him! Enough!" "No, not enough. Never enough." Jon let his sword drop. "I'm sorry," he muttered. "Emmett, are you hurt?" Before this fight, Jon had thought this about his prior matches with Emmett. Jon always came away from their sessions stiff and sore, and woke the next day covered with bruises, which was the way he wanted it. He would never get any better going up against the likes of Satin and Horse, or even Gren. Most days he gave as good as he got, Jon liked to think, but not today. A Storm of Swords, Jon 12. What we can glean from this quote is that Jon was still developing as a swordsman, but also, smartly, learning anything he can from the Ranger. We also see that he is humble. Many take that line, "Most days he gave as good as he got," Jon liked to think, to suggest that Jon is not that good and usually loses to Emmett. I disagree. I think Jon is being humble. This humility is pervasive in Jon's thoughts. I could point to numerous times where he underestimates or plays down his own abilities or actions, such as in his flawless defense against Qhorin's barrage of attacks described earlier. Humility is a virtue for him, and George R.R. Martin uses it to help us readers identify with Jon. But in my reading between the lines, Jon is pretty special, and most around him know it, save for Jon himself. In A Dance with Dragons, he then further uses the training yard to hone his skills. First with Emmett, then with Leathers, a wildling recruit who replaced Emmett, in his defeat to Mance Rayder, and also in the training yard with the other new Night's Watch recruits. With these opponents, Jon takes a page from Garland Tyrell's book, fighting multiple opponents at one time. He does so because he wants to prove to himself that he is worthy of his post as Lord Commander, and worthy of his Valyrian steel weapon. That sword, Longclaw, is a magical weapon that also plays a part in bumping Jon up this list. I think that, despite the loss to Mance, Jon proved during A Dance with Dragons that he is worthy of both title and blade. He also has the secret weapon of his bond to Ghost. Speaking of his magical ability, I argue that it can present as the magic of telekinesis, teak in George R.R. Martin's lingo, enhancing both the power and speed of any movement in a fighter. I think it might be partially what happened in the fight with Emmett during Jon's blackout. I am assuming that Jon's magic will get a level up, to use game lingo, after his resurrection. So by the end of The Winds of Winter, he may be higher on this list, or perhaps even at the top, especially if he ends up wielding Dawn, as I believe has been foreshadowed. For now, he is surpassed by number 4, Sir Barristan Selmy. Like Jon and Jaime, Barristan is a special talent, likely presenting King's blood as well. Sir Barristan's deeds over his storied career are too many to enumerate here, but suffice to say, he could be first on this list, if not for his advanced age. He measures himself thusly amidst his dismissal from the Kingsguard at the hands of Joffrey Baratheon. Have no fear, sirs. Your king is safe, no thanks to you. Even now I could cut through the 5 of you as easy as a dagger cuts cheese. A Game of Thrones, Sansa 5. While he disparaged the other 5 Kingsguard knights present at his dismissal as inferior to himself, he could not truthfully say as much about his replacement in their ranks. Number 3, Sandor Clegane. Sandor Clegane, aka the Hound, is a fearsome and savage fighter with a sword. He despises knights, but like the man whom I believe to be his forebear, Sir Duncan the Tall, he turns out to be more a true knight than those who stood a vigil, were anointed by a septon, and were dubbed by a knight. That said, his demons, especially related to his brother, nearly tear him apart. He wanted to kill Gregor, and might have done so if not for King Robert's lungs for battle command. The Mountain pivoted in wordless fury, swinging his longsword in a killing arc with all his massive strength behind it, but the Hound caught the blow and turned it, and for what seemed like an eternity, the two brothers stood hammering at each other as a dazed Loras Tyrell was helped to safety. Thrice Ned saw Sir Gregor aim savage blows at the Hound's head helmet, yet not once did Sandor send a cut at his brother's unprotected face. A Game of Thrones, Eddard 7. I believe both brothers to likely carry king's blood in their genes, which only makes Sandor more formidable. While it doesn't happen in the books, in the show we get to see him fight another likely descendant of Dunk. Number 2, Brienne of Tarth. I had a hell of a time deciding which of these two was a better sword fighter, but Brienne edges out Sandor for 2 reasons. First, she carries the magical blade Oathkeeper. Second, while she has severe injuries, they ought not be as debilitating as Sandor's leg wound. In having placed Jaime at 6th position on this list, I knew that I would be placing Brienne in the top 5. After all, she beat him just before the pair were captured by the Bloody Mummers in A Storm of Swords. How did she do it, aside from Jaime's bound wrists? It's a combination of skill, training, and strategy, all of which make her very deadly with a sword. Brienne was as strong as most knights, and her old master-at-arms used to say she was quicker than any woman her size had any right to be. The gods had given her stamina, too, which Sir Goodwin deemed a noble gift. Fighting with sword and shield was a wearisome business, and victory oft went to the man with most endurance. Sir Goodwin had taught her to fight cautiously, to conserve her strength while letting her foes spend theirs in furious attacks. Men will always underestimate you, he said, and their pride will make them want to vanquish you quickly, lest it be said that a woman tried them sorely. She had learned the truth of that once she went into the world. Even Jaime Lannister had come at her that way, in the woods by Maidenpool. A Feast for Crows, Brienne 2. I also believe Brienne to carry king's blood, perhaps from Sir Duncan and her grandmother, who likely had lain with the Lord Commander of Aegon V's Kingsguard. Now, there's only one swordsman left who could possibly be chosen for the top spot. Number 1, Mance Rayder. Some may disagree with my choice, citing how he's just a wildling, and that Ned had mentally dismissed him in A Game of Thrones. Well, I disagree. In A Dance with Dragons, after losing to Mance in the training yard, Jon thinks, "There's always someone quicker and stronger," Sir Roderick had once told Jon and Robb. "He's the man you want to face in the yard before you need to face his like upon a battlefield." A Dance with Dragons, Jon 6. I see irony in that quote because I don't believe there is anyone stronger than Mance Rayder in Westeros. His fight with Jon is eye-opening. Jon's signature humility isn't there because he thought he was fighting a man he doesn't respect, Rattleshirt, instead of Mance, whom he would respect.
Still, by the end, Jon knows he's been beaten.
Iron Emmett's fledglings cheered their Lord Commander at the start, but the relentless speed of Rattleshirt's attack soon beat them down to silence. He cannot keep this up for long, Jon told himself as he stopped another blow. The impact made him grunt. Even dulled, the greatsword cracked his pinewood shield and bent the iron rim. He will tire soon. He must. Jon slashed at the wildling's face, and Rattleshirt pulled back his head. He hacked down at Rattleshirt's calf, only to have him deftly leap the blade. The greatsword crashed down onto Jon's shoulder, hard enough to ding his pauldron and numb the arm beneath. Jon backed away. The Lord of Bones came after, chortling. He has no shield, Jon reminded himself. That monster sword's too cumbersome for parries. I should be landing 2 blows for every one of his. Somehow he wasn't, though, and the blows he did land were having no effect. The wildling always seemed to be moving away or sliding sideways, so Jon's longsword glanced off a shoulder or an arm. Before long he found himself giving more ground, trying to avoid the other's crashing cuts and failing half the time. His shield had been reduced to kindling. He shook it off his arm. Sweat was running down his face and stinging his eyes beneath his helm. He is too strong and too quick, he realized, and with that greatsword, he has weight and reach on me. It would have been a different fight if Jon had been armed with Longclaw, but... A Dance with Dragons, Jon VI. Mance has the whole package: footwork, strength, speed, quickness, training, a fighter's instinct, and yes, the king's blood of the first men. Some, like me, think it possible he may even be the legendary Sir Arthur Dayne, incognito. Whether true or not, he is currently the best sword fighter in Westeros. So there you have it. Mance is the best, but Jon belongs on this list, also being worthy of the company of the top 10 best sword fighters in Westeros.
Thanks to all the terrific artists who let me use their work on this YouTube video. If you enjoy this content, you can also consider supporting us on Patreon.